So thank you for being here. Thank you for inspiring it as well. So I'm thinking by way of introduction, it was at our most recent conference in 2014 that you joined us, and one of the conversations there was about, what else could we do? How could the deacons support what's going on in Province 1, and how could the deacons in Province 1 achieve some of the things that we've been wanting to do? Mainly, how do we stay in touch with each other in the intervening 2 years between conferences? And this is a great first step for us, I think, to be able to promote ministry that's going on in the province, and to be able to connect with one another and build relationships, to promote education about different kinds of ministries. And for people who are looking for support and sharing and building kind of collegial relationships, I think that this could provide a great opportunity to develop all of those things. So it's thrilling that we can get started. And we're a small group tonight. We knew it was going to be that way. We're a friendly audience. Jan is, I'm sure, thrilled about that. Take the pressure off of her as our first presenter of this series. And so tonight we're going to hear from Jan about what's going on in Rhode Island with the Center for Reconciliation. And because this is a pilot, we'll also be kind of reflecting on how is this going, what do we want to think about in terms of future web conferencing, future ideas, anything about the logistics, really anything at all that would be helpful in terms of moving this forward. So, any other thoughts from people before we get started?
Go for it.
Okay, let's turn it over to Jan. So the basic order for the evening, and we said we'll plan till about 8:30. We may go that long. We may end sooner because we're a smaller group tonight. The plan is to have Jan present to us and give us some insight and sharing with us about what's going on in Rhode Island, and then to be able to open it up for some conversation amongst all of us. So go for it, Jan.
Okay. Julie, do you want to help people minimize their pictures so we can go into the presenting mode?
Sure. One of the things we thought would be helpful is when we start our conversations to use this screen so that we all can see each other and talk to each other. When Jan's presenting, or in future references, whoever the presenter is, it's nice to focus on what they're presenting to us. So to close your camera, if you put your mouse over your screen, you should see an X in the upper right corner of your picture, and you can click on that to turn off your camera. So in the upper right-hand corner, there should be a little X, and just click on that. And when Jan's finished her presentation, she'll invite us to start our webcams again like we did at the beginning.
Yay.
Great.
Okay, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I'm really excited about us starting these Thursday night Walk on the Road to Emmaus conversations, because I think it's a great way to share everything that is happening across the various dioceses. And the more we can meet together, the stronger our communities can be. So I just wanted to start by reminding all of us that as deacons, we are the prophetic voice in the church. That's one of our major roles. And I remember questioning how it is that I could ever be a prophet. I certainly didn't want to be Jonah or Jeremiah or any of those characters from the Old Testament that had such a wonderful time trying to speak to the people about what it was that God might be saying to them. And so I, along the way with my ministry, I think I was doing things that were relatively safe, may I say. College chaplaincy, certainly what I'm involved with, is a nice faith ministry. I wasn't placing myself in harm's way at all. I wasn't ruffling any feathers, so to speak. I have done work in recovery with alcoholism, but mostly working with people who are in recovery, and on and on and on. And so this concept of prophetic voice was always quite distant to me. It was a nice concept, but I didn't know how it was that I would be able to participate in that. So what happened to me was, as many of you know, when we had our last triennium in Williamsburg with the Association for Episcopal Deacons, when we met there, and Katrina Browne was one of the workshop leaders, presenters, and she spoke about Traces of the Trade, which actually I had been involved with in Rhode Island when that film was created, and was actually blessed to be part of her final service at St. Michael's in Bristol when she spoke about the slave trade, and came back from the trip and was wondering about reconciliation. And we did prayers for healing, and it was a very powerful service. But as a result of where I was in my life and where this diocese was, it was not an appropriate time to really take action. And when I re-encountered her in Williamsburg, there was something that just spoke very strongly to me that today I know is the Holy Spirit that was saying, now is the time for Rhode Island to do something. And so I came back and basically stumbled into the prophetic voice of the deacon, because without really thinking about that, I started talking about my experience in Williamsburg and that we needed to do something. That, as a matter of fact, what was striking me, and that I'm going to bring up on the screen now, is the resolution from General Convention in 2006. And the fact that one of the things that Katrina mentioned in her workshop was that this work that was called for by the General Convention, the resolution A123, and I know you can't read what's on the screen, and that's not really important that you read it, because I'm going to point out to you the important parts of that. But just initially, basically, they were resolving that the institution of slavery in the United States and anywhere else in the world, based as it is on ownership of some person or by other persons, was and is a sin and a fundamental betrayal of the humanity of all persons who were involved. And so that was the beginning of the resolution. And then they went on to say, we resolved that the Episcopal Church acknowledges its history of participation in this sin. That's a really powerful statement, and what I have learned since I have been involved in this work now is something that I want to bring your attention to, that I have learned, that there's a difference between knowledge and acknowledged. Knowledge is learning something, so we all know that the slave trade existed. That was not news to any of us. There was knowledge for me as a result of Traces of the Trade, where I came to know in my brain that slavery was a sin, and it was a sin that was not only in the South, but it was also in the North. And to take it even further, it was the North played the role of the initiators of the slave trade, and Rhode Island itself had the largest slave trade activity of any of the colonies. So there was knowledge that was given to me that was new. The word acknowledge is different than the word knowledge. And what I'm learning is that to acknowledge something means you take ownership of it. Not only is it any longer something that is in my brain, that I understand, that I can repeat, but by acknowledging, and what the Episcopal Church did in 2006 said, we now own this knowledge. We now own our participation in this sin. So that's a very powerful part of the resolution. And further down in the resolution, in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th part of that. It says, and this is the real key part for me, that the 75th General Convention of the Episcopal Church through the Executive Council urgently initiate a comprehensive program and urge every diocese to collect and document during the next triennium detailed information in its community on A, the complicity of the Episcopal Church in the institution of slavery and in the subsequent history of segregation and discrimination, and B, the economic benefits the Episcopal Church derived from the institution of slavery, and direct the Committee on Anti-Racism to monitor this program and report to Executive Council each year by March 31st on the progress in each diocese, and then it says, and be it for the result. What I came to understand was that the Diocese of Rhode Island did nothing between the years 2006 and 2013 that we were in Williamsburg, that we had done nothing. And here the Diocese of Rhode Island was one of the key components of the slave trade. And I was really appalled. And Katrina said during the workshop that I was with her in, she said, this is a very diaconal activity that needs to happen here. We need to be the prophetic voice. We need to raise up to the Episcopal Church its ownership, its acknowledgement, not just its knowledge of its participation, and do something about it. So, so that is the background for what happened here in Rhode Island. So to fast forward then, I was speaking with my spiritual director when I came back from Williamsburg and was talking about how much this moved me and how I was affected by that, and that I needed to do something, but I didn't know what. And he said, because I'm the action person. I am the, oh my gosh, now we have to do something, let's move fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, get the project plan, let's get it organized, and let's move forward. That's the way I work in business. And he said, I think you need to sit with this, Jan, and just pray about it and let it happen. Well, that is the last thing in the world that Jan Grinnell ever wants to hear, is to sit and be patient and to pray. But I did, and I waited. And it wasn't until the following December, and I had mentioned to, so we came back from Williamsburg in June. I mentioned to our bishop in July, who was brand new. He hadn't been a bishop of Rhode Island for even a year. It was from November to July when I first mentioned this to him. And he was, as you might expect, just overwhelmed with learning how to be a bishop and learning all the things that are going on in Rhode Island. And so he said, Jan, I can't deal with this right now. And I thought, oh no, here we go again. So by December, I thought, well, July to December, that's certainly enough time for this man to get on board. And I felt this stirring inside of me that it was time, once again, to say something. And so I scheduled a meeting with him. And I thought what I will do, the project manager, Jan, what I would do is I would take the plan into him and say, here's what we need to do. And this is how we need to do it and when we should do it and blah, 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 blah. The problem was I couldn't come up with anything to put on paper. I do this as a profession, and I am very good at putting together detailed project plans. And I basically have a blank piece of paper. The priest that I work with, David Dobbins, he and I, which is another whole topic, we're a priest-deacon team doing interim ministry in Rhode Island. And David and I were sitting having dinner 2 days before I was to meet with the bishop. And I said, David, I need to come up with my project plan because I'm going to talk to him. It's now, fish or cut bait. And so he said, well, Jan, the diocese, we're all sitting around trying to figure out what to do with our cathedral. Our cathedral had been closed in the year, I believe, 2010 by the previous bishop, well, or some number of years. I'm not exactly sure when. But it was closed, and it was sitting vacant, and the people in the diocese were quite upset that it was ever closed, but it was closed because it needed so much repair, like $10 million was the estimate to repair it. And, it was this beautiful colonial building. And so when the new bishop came, the people were basically saying to him, we need to figure out what to do with our cathedral because we wanted to be a cathedral. He formed a task group to work with people in the diocese, with the laity and clergy, to try to come up with options for the cathedral. David said, what about a slave trade museum at the cathedral? And it just was, wow, what a concept, what a great concept. It so happens that our cathedral is a colonial church. It was in fact built with slave trade money, and much of it was built by slaves. It has slaves buried in its cemetery, and it sits approximately 2 blocks away from the wharf where slaves were brought into the city of Providence. In Bristol, Rhode Island, which is in the Traces of the Trade movie, that parish was built with slave trade money, and it was also built with slave labor. The same story for Trinity Church, Newport, and Narragansett Church, now called St. Paul's Church in Wickford. All 4 colonial parishes had the same story. And so here it was that this small diocese was at the heart of one of the greatest sins of this country and what each of us have benefited from through the concept of white privilege and the Episcopal Church, the history of the Episcopal Church and the slave trade and the results of our involvement throughout the years is phenomenal once you start looking into it. So that was the beginning of it. And what has transpired since, if I can share with you briefly, is our diocese in its diocesan convention last October. David and I met with 12 people, and it was 12 people who we thought might be interested in this project to explore it with them. And when I looked around the room and I saw that we had 6 African Americans and 6 European white Americans in the room, it was pretty phenomenal. As you all know, the number 12 is pretty special to us. And there was a fire ignited with those 12 people. And we went back to the task force with a proposal for the cathedral to be used for this purpose. And in October, our diocesan convention passed a resolution to support this. We couldn't say that we would do it because the cathedral is its own corporation. And so from there, we formed a steering committee. And what you have here is a list of where we have come to date in terms of the vision that we have. And what's going to happen is that the Cathedral of St. John will be the host site of the Center for Reconciliation. The Center for Reconciliation is a 501c3. We just incorporated about 4 weeks ago. And it will be hosted in the cathedral, but the other parts of the cathedral and the cathedral development project will include a museum on the history of the slave trade with a large focus on the history of the Episcopal Church and the slave trade. It will be a performing arts center where we will bring in performing arts that reflect reconciliation of some form between African Americans and European white Americans. And it will have a worshiping community. It will not be limited to just the Episcopal Church. Any worshiping community will be able to approach us and ask to use this space. And so all these various things will be going on as well as education and programming. So the vision is we envision a time when people of all races are reconciled to one another. So moving from vision, which is the big dream, so to speak, down to the mission, the CFR, Center for Reconciliation, fosters interracial reconciliation through programs that engage, educate, and inspire. The guiding principles, which are very important in terms of keeping us focused and on track with what we want to be doing, is that we will collaborate with those who work for reconciliation. What we are doing is we have engaged, you will see in a few minutes, I will show you the various work teams that we have, But we are looking for people who we can work with and not do all this work ourselves. And we have discovered an amazing number of people in Rhode Island who are working on reconciliation and healing of hurts and harms done. It's really been a powerful experience that anytime we talk about this, people come at us with enthusiasm, energy, wanting to participate. And so the collaborations, we have approximately 20 to 30 groups now that have said, whoops, somehow or other my webcam went away. I apologize. Not sure how that happened, but there I am. I'm back again. Anyway, so we have this whole list of people that we're collaborating with. Another guiding principle is that we'll be honest as we look at our past and face our future, and that we will model and invite others into an open and honest exploration of our painful past. We will seek justice for all. We will be compassionate actors and advocates. We will work interracially. And we will be who we are and work to become who we want to be. So those are the guiding principles. As we have moved along, we have developed work teams within the steering committee. And so we have an education and training component. And I am the convener of that group at this time. We have a performance and events team. As I said, we're very excited about various performing arts groups coming in. The Faith and Slavery Museum, of course. The development team, they're the ones that have to handle the money for both the cathedral as well as the Center for Reconciliation. And then communications and publicity and worshiping communities that will share with the Episcopal Church in using this space. One of the things that I wanted to share with you, and this did get released through the Association for Episcopal Deacons in one of the recent issues, but let me just get this lined up here. The Diocese of Rhode Island has a monthly magazine called Risen, R-I-S-E-N, Risen, and in addition to publications, we have had press coverage as far west as the LA Times has picked up on this story. And you will see in the chat box over here that Julie has put in a link where if you want to read the article that was published that gives you more history about the cathedral, then if you copy this link and take it into your own browser, you'll be able to read this more in-depth history of exactly what has happened in trying to use the cathedral for the purposes of Center for Reconciliation. And the article is A Vision for the Cathedral of St. John. And if you can see as I move this, there is an inside picture of the cathedral as it looks now. Covered, all the pews are covered. The whole thing has been closed down completely. So you have that article that you can reference if you want more things like that. And of course, you can talk to me anytime that you so desire. So if you would click back on your videos and come back online so that we can have a conversation about this. I think the most important thing to share with you is that we do have a prophetic voice and we can make a difference as deacons, not only around this resolution, but about many things that are confronting each and every one of us. And as I started out by saying, I didn't know that I could have a prophetic voice, but I have come to understand that as I am engaged in this project, number one, the fact that at the right time, the prophetic voice of the deacon can not only be powerful, but it can make a difference. And that's what we're seeing here in Rhode Island. I'm also hoping that in 2019, I guess it will be, that the Association for Episcopal Deacons will be able to come to Rhode Island and that part of the cathedral will be far enough along so that we can explore that together and actually see it. We expect that the project will take 10 years to come to complete fruition on the physical space renovations and the museum itself. But meanwhile, the other thing that I just wanted to mention is to do ministry, you don't need the four walls of a church. We all know that. And so the thing that we're starting with to have the Center for Reconciliation begin to make a difference in Rhode Island, next fall, I was at a planning meeting today with the 3 colonial churches that are open, that are the living artifacts of what we benefited from on a physical level from the slave trade. These beautiful buildings that we worship in. If you've ever been to Trinity Newport, I mean, it's an amazing place. So each of these churches, in September we are going to St. Michael's, in October we are going to Trinity Newport, and in November we are going to St. Paul's Wickford. And we are going to show the film Traces of the Trade, and then we are going to host a panel discussion by some of the academics that are involved with this project who will give more about the history of the slave trade in Rhode Island beyond just the DeWolf Perry family that you hear about in Traces of the Trade, because it's very easy to say when you see that movie, that poor family, oh my, oh, they were, you know, like bad, but that's not me. That was 200 years ago. That's not me. And the reality is we need to shift from looking at that movie to understanding that the effects of the slave trade from 200 years ago is being realized today in our society through white privilege, through how we live each of our lives. Every day we walk down the street and we are relatively free and not oppressed. And then we turn around and we look at Baltimore and Ferguson, and we know that this country has not healed. This country has not resolve the issues with racial divides. Anyway, and so we are starting in the fall these programs where we can hopefully begin to have conversations, because the whole purpose of reconciliation is healing. The whole purpose of reconciliation happens when people tell their stories. And so we will be starting the work of the center without the cathedral itself. And that's very beautiful to me. So I think that I would like to open it up for discussion now, and I probably talked too long because I could talk for 4 hours or more. It's hard to be quiet.
It's great to see your passion.
Yeah, terrific.
So questions or comments or thoughts? Or Julie can turn this off.
Jan, it's Bonnie. When you have the your services and you see the movie, are you going to have like town hall meetings after them? Are you going to have a town hall meeting in those churches not on the same day? How are you planning that?
What we talked about today, Bonnie, is that in planning the event, which is only starting, the initial planning was today, we have to answer the question of what did we want to achieve in a 2-hour period, when 51 minutes of that will be looking at the film. Mm-hmm. And the answer is we want people to move from this isn't about me to this is about me. That history has played out in my life and continues to play out in my life, and I need to, this comes back to the word acknowledge. I don't need to know about the history. I need to acknowledge that the history has impacted Jan Grinnell. I sit in a beautiful house talking to you tonight because of history that happened 200 years ago that enabled this country to become what it is, based on using and misusing and abusing other human beings. And the culture, the caste system that we live in, if you really think about it, with the rich and the poor, and who composes the majority of the poor, all these things are as a result of what happened a long time ago in this country. And if we can move from people knowing that history to acknowledging that history, that will be an amazing thing to accomplish in an hour, because that's really the amount of time that we'll have for conversations. but hoping to do that not through a town meeting or talkback sessions, rather through giving more education from the academics who will be with us. And this will be an interracial conversation. It will be inspired by African American history professors, as well as Episcopal theologians. Tuck Shattuck has written a book. There's another Episcopalian by the name of Jan Grinnell who wrote a book on slavery in Rhode Island, to actually move us from the concept of that movie was, and I don't know what your reaction initially was, but the first time I saw it, it was like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about those people. I didn't know that that happened. And it wasn't about me. You know, I felt bad. I felt sad, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But where I have moved to is a totally different place. That this is really about, that movie is about me today and the privileges that I have. And so that's what we hope to accomplish that night, and also to offer to people what next steps could they take. And we don't have those mapped out yet, but the fact that we will have obviously more programs that they can attend, there are ways for people to get involved. There will be World Cafe sessions where people can come together and start telling stories and having conversations, but there will be things for people to do other than walk out and say, that was a powerful movie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yes, you did. I think I'm probably thinking further ahead after acknowledgement, and just even understanding that if you are a person of color, you don't wear a hoodie and walk down the street at night with the hood up on it. I never had to think about those things. And that all stems from slavery. And I'm just thinking of ways of entertaining conversation around how 200 years ago, yes, we acknowledge it, but how 200 years ago happened and still continues to happen. But I think that's further down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things further down the road, too, is that we want to offer training, you know, not just education, but offer training and train people who can handle the Fergusons, who can handle the Baltimores. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know where this is going to stop, and we're fully prepared for that movement to move into Providence. And we aren't equipped as Episcopal clergy to step in and do anything right now. You know, it's not a matter of being just walking in and saying, wow, I have compassion and I understand. That's not how you handle volatile and potentially violent situations. So we hope that that kind of training, which is apparently only offered at 2 or 3 other places in the whole country, that we could bring those people to Providence to train people in New England or whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot of energy around this, and knowing that I think with any of our ministries, we have to start where we are, and we have to start with who is with us, and be intentional and willing to allow it to evolve. So that's part of the understanding that we have with this, that we can't start by saying we're going to train people to handle Ferguson when we don't even have, I haven't done the work that I need to do on Jan, you know, and the steering committee is preparing for a retreat to learn and to work through our own prejudices that we all have, because we need to do that before we can develop programs to help others or to bring in the collaborators. We don't even have to invent the programs, but to bring the programs in, we need to understand what is a good program and what's a program that wouldn't work here.
Yep.
Jan, are you familiar with the group, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond?
I am not, no.
They are an Undoing Racism group that's been around for about 30 years based in New Orleans.
Okay.
They focus exclusively on racism and on the history of racism in the United States and the ways in which racism in the United States is being exported around the world through capitalism and, commercial development and things like that. But one of the things that they talk about is that the only way to undo racism is to organize. It came into being through organizing powers, through, those colonial forebears, mostly fathers, who organized it and kept it in place. And their belief is that you need organizing again. And I was thinking about your presentation in terms of the collaboration piece, that building those relationships of people who are willing to and committed to the same kind of personal self-analysis and working through that and then building relationships across racial divides so that people can work together to undo it, because it's a very powerful force in our country. And,
so could you send me that information?
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely the kind of thing that is good about having these calls, Kyle.
Yeah.
If you can share that information with me, that definitely will go on to our list and we will research that.
So this is something that my wife, and several colleagues in New Haven have participated in. There are groups in the New England area. I actually recently went to a training in Western Massachusetts in Greenfield, and there's been a group that's been organizing there for, I think, like 20 years. And the trainers come from all over. I just put the link into the chat.
Okay.
But it's a fantastic, fantastic training and a fantastic, national network of people who are committed to this. I think they'd also be very interested in what you're doing in Rhode Island.
Great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on an experience up here in Vermont when we saw traces of the trade, and maybe this is self-evident, but it seems that we have a kind of an arrogance or almost xenophobia in New England about, I'm sorry, I did something weird here, about who we are and not being complicit, and I know that's what you were saying, but it was so clear that we, particularly in terms of the South, that we are no better nor no worse than people in Alabama and Mississippi, and we need to remember that, because it's very easy for us as New Englanders to have this kind of arrogance or superiority, which doesn't suit us well and is less than helpful.
Mm-hmm. So, Jan, one of the things that I've been wondering, since you started talking about this, it's partly about you and your own skills and background, but you talked about it tonight about the project planning part of you that wants to drive things forward and the other part that has to step back. Like, how do you as a deacon or just as a person balance those, what might be like competing drives almost?
The one thing that our bishop requires of all his clergy that I was not fully engaged in prior to his arrival here because of some unfortunate experiences is spiritual direction. And it's my spiritual director, Kyle, that has really made a big difference in bouncing things off of. And I trust this person who is absolutely opposite me. He is a lay person. He is a male. And he is a contemplative. He is my opposite. And he is this wonderful, spiritually balanced man that I listen to. And so when he suggested that I wait and that I pray and let it become part of me, I did it. And I see him about every other month, something like that. So it really is a new experience for me, Kyle, that I would be willing to even attempt to do what he suggested. And now what I have found is I think in the past I was so used to as a deacon of operating as an individual, lone wolf. You know, we talk about the 7 ways of the diaconate and how back in the 80s it was, what is your diaconate? Well, I do this and I do that. I am a chaplain. I am a pastoral counselor in a nursing home or whatever, that I was so used to that mode of operation that what has transpired with all these different pieces coming together at the same time, including our conference with NEDN, I can't emphasize enough how important it has been for me to be with the archdeacons and the directors, AED, NEDN, anytime when I can get together with deacons, and this is a sales pitch, okay, in answer to your question, but anytime I can get together with you people, I learn something that I need to do to strengthen myself. And so when this project was ready to start, I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And the word that was in there was I. How am I going to do it? And very quickly, because of all of our gatherings and all the things that I have learned, and from Suzanne's talk on the 7 ways and how we're shifting to being the gatherers and being rooted in the baptismal covenant, and that we are doing ministry with people, not to people or for people, all that impacted me so that when the steering committee was formed this is a confession. Can you turn the camera off now? The first time in my life, I knew that I didn't have to be in charge. Seriously. And that was a totally different experience for me. And Stan, just a little bit that I had been involved with the General Convention coming, knowing that I am going to be one among thousands now instead of one among 10 or 5 or 6. All that has shifted, Kyle, so that I am not only comfortable, but I am enjoying and I am embracing being one of the group, one of the steering committee, as opposed to the person in charge. So I think a lot of it is just timing, and maybe at age 67 I'm finally growing up. I don't know, you know, but what I'm able to do is that person that knows how to do that skill set can offer those skills on this small subcommittee of education and trying to pull together 3 parishes, screening a film, you know, and I'm working with James DeWolf Perry, by the way, from the Tracing Center. So he's directly involved with this as well. So I just can't say enough for what I am learning from our community. And that really is one of the direct answers to that question of how could I balance, you know, the skills that I have, the temperament and the personality that I have with something that is so much bigger than myself that I'm just grateful that I'm able to be part of instead of in charge, or I'm the deacon that has to lead the charge, I'm the deacon that has the prophetic voice, you know, that being a deacon doesn't have to be any longer the one and only who's going to lead the charge and go out there and do it and then hope that others will benefit.
Still okay to have your prophetic voice even though you're letting other people take the lead.
Absolutely. And, you know, somebody said to me, Catherine, because somewhere along the line when we were talking about something on the committee, I said, well, let's not forget our purpose here, you know, and David Dobbins, my dear priest friend, later said to me, that prophetic voice of yours, Jan, you know, keeping us on the right path. You know, so it's not really such a hard thing to do. It's saying the right thing at the right time. But you're right, Catherine, that the prophetic voice is expressed in so many different ways, I think. Certainly through our actions, but really, I mean, it is a voice, and we need to be heard, and we need to speak up when we see something because this could take off in 1,000 directions.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the focus of this is a response to the 2006 resolution, and it's about the Episcopal Church initially. And it can grow into something bigger and better, but we have work to do that we had God calling us to do through the General Convention.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to do that work and focus on that and let it be as it will develop to be.
Is this still part of General Convention for this next triennium?
Stan? our experienced deputy will answer that question.
It would be good for everyone to go on the General Convention website and look at the Blue Book reports. And you'll see everything that happened in the last 3 years. And it's extensive. And the big things, of course, are the marriage piece and the restructuring of the church and the election of the presiding bishop. But there's lots of other stuff. And it would be helpful. I'm going to actually be talking with Jane Gould a little bit before I present in a month to find out, because she is the secretary of the social justice, it has a new name. Julie, you may remember what it is, but something like International Affairs and Social Issues. But she's the one of the leaders of that group, and I'm not as up as I want to be on what's coming before that group in terms of resolutions. So the resolutions get assigned to all the different legislative committees. And when I hear from her, I can communicate to you what's coming through this time. Mm-hmm. Things don't die, though. Things have a life as long as they have a life. And I think the fruit of the resolution that you're talking about, Jan, from 2006, is that groups like yours are continuing it. If we want the General Convention to do any additional work, then resolutions need to be proposed either through dioceses or synods or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it would be good for all of go onto the General Convention webpage, and all of the Blue Book reports are out now, I think, and every report is there.
Okay.
So we can maybe even include that, Julie, in the announcement for the next web conference with Stan.
I'll send you, Kyle. I actually just sent some links to folks at St. Paul's Cathedral, where I am in terms of adult education, so we're going to do 2 sessions on convention. I sent some links out that link to things like the convention, sort of the convention diagram, but then to resolutions in the Blue Book and that kind of thing. So I'll send those to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That'd be great. That'd be great.
And I would suggest, because the volume, I have not gone through all the reports yet. I have started, but what I would suggest is that we get that information to people now.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of reading to do in the next time.
Right, right.
You know, they can't do it the night before.
Right.
I'll send links out to Kyle tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be great, and we'll send that out. And send it to you, Julie. We can include it in the next, we'll do an event registration again, so that will have information. Terrific.
I have to say I'm incredibly excited by what looks to me like deacon power at this convention, unless there's a better word for it, but with Lori coming and her energy and already talking about when deacons are going to get together and how we're going to communicate during General Convention, that's wonderful. That's kind of new, rather than feeling like we're these lone ships in this mass of lay folks and priests. And you know there are some dioceses that will not send a deacon at this point. So it's quite a mishmash in terms of how deacons are perceived throughout the Episcopal Church.
We have 25 deacon deputies is the number that I heard.
You say 25. I heard 35, but you could be absolutely right. I know that
So it's
Lori,
5. It ends in 5.
Lori was going to check Gay Jennings, who has a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that actually shows how many deacons are there.
Yeah.
So Lori should have that information soon.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic.
If I can offer a little bit of context from the province perspective, part of what's happened with the resolution from 2006 is that the dioceses have become the managers of making sure that anti-racism training occurs, and it's a checkoff box primarily for those being ordained. There's been a huge movement across the church to try to get more expansive in our understanding and to look at it beyond just the single training, to look at it more as a formational need. We've been formed to think in the way that we are, and we have to unform and reform the way we understand how we are as those of us gathered privileged white people. And so part of what the province here has been doing for the past year and a half is looking at resources and trying to find a way to train people in the dynamics of power and looking at a variety of different curriculum. They're all very good. What's going to be important is how do we facilitate conversations so that talking across difference really can lead to transformation. There's a strong effort going on right now within our province to be able to do some exciting things. And I know we're looking to be partnering. So, Jan, I hope we can continue these conversations and see how to connect what you all are doing in the cathedral as well as across the Deacons Network with the things that are happening in the subcommittee so that we're not reinventing the wheel and so that we can do mutually supportive activities to continue to reinforce the formation in a direction that's going to be more conscious of the way in which we've moved as a society and do that acknowledgement that you've talked about so that we can hopefully transform the way we're doing things into more healthy ways of building relationships.
Julie, I think that would be fantastic. One of the things you were already doing that is so appreciated is beginning to make resources available synod-wide. And I was thinking we just had a very small thing up here in Vermont, but we have a deacon coming through who's I think going to become a candidate that I've been meeting with, and he needs obviously to have anti-racism training. It hasn't been offered in Vermont in a year and a half, I think. So he's going to go down to Boston to take it down there, which is great. But it seems like if there was a more sort of a coordinated synod-wide training schedule, that's a nuts and bolts thing, but I think it leads to greater consciousness. And then a small diocese like us, we don't sort of put all our resources in Safe Church and forget to do anti-racism, if you know what I'm saying, so that there's sort of a synod-wide schedule going on all the time that people can hook into.
That is our goal. Our goal is to have comprehensive training that's going to be available so that folks in any diocese in the province, the bishops will recognize it across the different dioceses, wherever it happens to be. And we want to do more than just training. We want to have events and activities where people can participate. We'd like to have forums like this where we can have ongoing conversations. We, as a task force, were just talking about with the events in Ferguson and Baltimore, should we be creating a forum right now for people to be exploring what is happening in our communities and how do we take national events into a local place so that we can support each other in figuring out how to best respond. So those things are close to being launched. They're not quite there yet, but keep watching the province website, and I'll be sending out news announcements